Hey guys, before we start, a quick shout out to Alpha Dog Nutrition for sponsoring this podcast. Alpha Dog products are now available at dusupply.com, and you can use code ALPHADOG15 at checkout for 15% off and a credit for free shipping to try it yourself. Now let's get you to your podcast.
Find yourself in the pages of Full Cry as we dive into the archives of America's leading tree dog publication. Join us as we look back at decades of stories, articles, and more written by those bold enough to follow the echoes of a hound.
Hunting season is amongst us again, and that is the time when everybody laments about being a hunter's widow. This article brought to you from the December 1944 issue. Let's see what she says. One snappy evening last winter, my husband and I were sitting in the living room after dinner. He worked the night shift at the defense factory, and it was nearing time for him to go to work. To me, it seemed that his mind was always on coon, 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 until more than once I wished for a change in conversation. Golly, but it's a perfect night for a coon hunt, he said. I wish I could go, but I've just got to work. I had been with Bob on every chase but one that fall, and inside me were kindling sparks of interest because I had the joy in bringing home the furry animals in spite of being cold and tired. Bob kept teasing me to take the dog and go. He thought his dad would go along to do the shooting because I had no license. It was so cold I hated to leave the house, and I had to find a place to leave the baby. I had only a few minutes in which to make the decision because if I went, I had to take my husband to work so that I could have the car. Into the car we went, dog, baby, lantern, gun, and all. Bob gave me 6 shells, which I put in my pocket with the remark, "What do you think I want all these for?" We live on one side of Chautauqua Lake, and my sister-in-law lives on the other side where I intended to leave the baby. When we got there, after almost getting out of patience trying to get Pop to hurry his boots, we were only to find there was no one at home. The only thing to do was to go home or find another place to leave the baby. Although I was already cold, I hated to go home after getting all ready to go. So back around the end of the lake we went and finally found a place to leave her. However, the place we wanted to hunt was on the opposite side of the lake, so we still had to go around. Finally, we were off. Everyone thinking I was crazy, including myself. You see, inside me, one part kept saying, "Go home where it's warm and be sensible." But the other part kept saying, "Better go, you might miss some fun." Buck, our dog, is our big red-bone silent trailer, and this was his first season for actual hunting. The person that had him before we got him used him for a farm dog and pet. At last we got to our destination along the Pendergrass Creek, where once before Buck had caught one on the ground. I had my mind all made up that if Buck didn't tree a coon the first hour, I was heading for home. I wanted to get home by 12 or 12:30 if possible. We walked along the ridge above the creek for a little way. Everything was quiet. A feeling of utter disappointment swept over me. I was so sure he'd find one here. The moonlight was so bright we didn't need the lanterns, and it was so cold I had to keep walking to keep my toes warm. We walked toward a nearby cornfield, and after a little while we heard Buck whimper. Not the yip he gives when he strikes the track. It wasn't long till Buck was back. He couldn't find a thing. I was ready to go home, but Pop coaxed me to try a little hemlock grove down the road 1.5 miles. So I said okay, but not for more than half an hour. We had trouble getting the dog in the car. He didn't like the idea of going home so quick. We had only gone about half the distance when what should I see in the side of the road in the gleam of the headlight? But yes, I was sure it was a coon. It waddled. Slamming on the brakes, I yelled at Pop to let the dog out. He thought I was crazy, I guess. He just sat there. I grabbed at the door and out pounced the dog. He had hardly time to reach the pavement when we heard crunch, crunch, crunching of bones. How Pop did laugh. It was just a possum. My spirits began to rise. It was something to show for this wild goose chase. Again, we let Buck loose, and we headed right for the grove. Pop and I were in the process of going over a barbed wire fence when yip, Buck hit something hot. I I fairly squealed with delight. What, to my surprise, before we could reach the grove of trees, Buck was frantically telling us he had him up. How I did run. I couldn't wait for Pop, and sure enough, there in an elm, there were 2 shining eyes. The first shell brought Mr. Coon down, and what a pretty one. By this time, I had forgotten all about my cold feet. It was great excitement to see Buck battle with that fighting ball of fury. The moon was so bright I kept catching myself looking in the treetops for coon, when all of a sudden, sure enough, I spotted one. I said to Pop, "See that bump on a limb? What do you see but a coon?" Buck was busy working another track by this time. I couldn't just stand there, so I took my flash and tried to find eyes in that hump. Leaping lizards, there were 2 fire-like beady eyes shining down at me. I yelled for Pop to bring the gun. I wanted Buck to be there to finish the kill, and Pop insisted that we wait for Buck. Here he comes, right to my tree, and barked up like crazy. It took 2 shots to bring that coon down, and the good old dog had the time of his life for a few seconds. All you could hear were squeals, hisses, and growls all mixed up, and then Buck looked to us for approval. For some reason, the dog didn't want to leave the tree, so I kept shining the light up in the branches. Just as I was about to leave, my eyes caught one shining bead. Sure enough, there was another coon there, hiding in a crotch. Pop fired. It hit him, but he didn't come down. Up to the top of the elm he crawled, and what a high tree. My neck was just aching from looking up in the branches so long. He fired again, missed. Well, that left only 1 shell, and I had wondered why Bob had given me so many. He took careful aim and missed again. What were we to do? But no, I couldn't go home and leave that beautiful coon in the tree. Pop went to the car to look for the possibility of some extra shells. It was 3:30 in the morning, and we couldn't think of anyone we could waken to see if we could borrow some. I heard Pop trudging along. He had found a box of deer slugs. He said he was a bit afraid the shot would blow Mr. Coon to bits, so he aimed to just graze him enough to bring him down. He kept missing with every shot. I begged him to aim for the middle because I knew my husband prized every shell, now that they're so hard to get. Well, with Bud yelping constantly and Pop firing the gun so often and my neck aching and I was jumping up and down, my feet were so cold because I was standing ankle deep in the slushy water, I began to wish I were home. But more than that, I wished I had a license so that I could shoot that coon. Somehow, although I couldn't count the times I've shot a gun, I knew I could aim better than that. Despair? Yes, almost. The whole box of deer shells were gone, and still Mr. Coon just sat there. At last, he began to feel sick and started sliding down the tree. But Buck wouldn't give him a chance to run, so he sat in a crotch, still many feet up in the tree. We didn't bring the hatchet, so I waited patiently while Pop cut a sapling with his jackknife, which is always sharp, thank goodness. At last, using the pole, Pop poked Mr. Coon out, and boy, did Buck ever grab that one. It was 4:30 now, and I had to be to the factory to pick up my husband at 6 o'clock. I was in a hurry to go home, but alas, Pop had set the unlighted lantern down by a log, someplace, heaven only knows where, because we spent almost 3/4 of an hour hunting for it, and we never did find it. We hurried home. Pop scolded because I drove so fast. We picked up the baby, skinned the coon, and went down for my husband. My mother and dad were coming to spend the day, and I had had no sleep. Your readers are probably wondering what my husband thought. He knew I intended to come home early, so after 12 o'clock, he began telephoning every hour to find out what kind of luck we had had. Finally, he got tired of phoning. I guess he thought we'd got lost or something, but he was surprised and doubly sorry he wasn't along. Now, you hunters' widows, if you don't understand why your husband stays out so late, well, please try to be patient. I used to get cross, but now I understand what it's all about. I had to concentrate hard to prepare dinner that day. I was so tired, my teeth were numb, but I wouldn't have missed it for anything. And believe you me, I'm going to have a license so I can shoot the coon myself next time. Oh yes, my husband mourned the loss of all those shells, precious as they are, but I think he considers it worth it to have his wife understand all his coon stories. Bob is in the Army Corps now, and it makes me happy to know that Pop and I will give Buck plenty of work this fall.
Hi, this is Colin Doobie, and I wanted to tell you about the Full Cry magazine. Every month in the Kids Corner, we're giving out a $25 gift card for drawings and pictures and paintings. So get pictures or paintings or drawings in and see if we choose you in the Full Cry magazine Kids Corner. Thank you. Bye.
Like what you heard? Leave us a review and make sure to tag @FullCryMag when sharing your own adventures. You can check out more vintage content and get your subscription to the all-new Full Cry magazine at www.fullcrymag.com. From the pages of Full Cry is a Full Cry production. We want to thank our sponsors and encourage everyone to support those who support our lifestyle. This episode would not be possible without the support of Next Level Super Premium Dog Food and W Hunting Supply. Until next time, keep those dogs in the woods and find yourself in the pages of Full Cry.